All right, everyone, so get this. Imagine settling in, ready for, some classic dating game action, right? The cheesy dates, the awkward jokes, the whole bit.
Oh, I know the one.
And then, bam, it hits you. The guy trying to win a date, he's not some regular Joe. He's a serial killer.
Talk about a plot twist.
No kidding. That's the messed up reality we're dealing with today. Rodney Alcala. This guy wasn't just some background character. He was on the dating game back in 78.
78. And get this, he was already a convicted criminal. Convicted? Like, what were they thinking?
It's one of those things you hear about and think, how did that slip through the cracks? Unbelievable. Right. So picture it. Alcala's the bachelor, all smiles, hoping to woo Cheryl Bradshaw, the bachelorette. He was smooth, cracking jokes, playing the nice guy perfectly. At least that's what everyone thought at the time.
Yeah, that's what makes it so creepy. You'd never suspect a thing.
Exactly. So knowing what we know now, were there any red flags? Anything that looking back screamed, this guy's bad news?
Well, there's this other contestant, Jed Mills. He said later that Alcala would, he remembers him saying something like, I always get my girl.
Okay, that's pretty darn creepy.
Yeah, and Mills even used the word creepy to describe him back then. Apparently not everyone was buying the act.
Wow. And what about Cheryl Bradshaw? Did she end up actually going on a date with him?
She picked him on the show he won, technically. But, and this is the crazy part, afterwards, she told the producers, nope, something's off. Weird vibes, she called it. Refused to go on the date.
Good instincts. What were the producers doing, though? No background checks?
You'd think that'd be, step one. Right. But get this. The show's coordinator, Ellen Metzger, she fought to get Alcala on.
She did. Why?
Thought he was exactly what they wanted. Tall, dark, and handsome, she called him. If only she knew.
It's chilling thinking about it now.
Even creepier. The show's producer, Mike Metzger, he said later that Alcala's personality struck him as odd, even unsettling. But a serial killer, unimaginable back then. Here's the kicker, though. When Alcala was on the dating game, he wasn't just some, parking ticket kind of criminal. He was a wanted man.
Wait, seriously?
Dead serious. He was on the FBI's most wanted list. And it wasn't for, jaywalking. Years earlier, in '68, he attacked an 8-year-old girl, Tali Shapiro.
Oh, God, that's awful. What happened?
Lured her into his apartment in Hollywood, brutally attacked her. Luckily, someone saw something was up and called the cops.
Thank goodness.
But Alcala, he was slippery. Gone before they could catch him. Vanished from California entirely.
How did they find him?
He ends up in New Hampshire, working as a counselor at a girls' camp.
Are you kidding me? That's terrifying.
Right, and this is where it gets wild. 2 campers, they see a wanted poster, recognize Alcala at the post office, of all places.
You can't make this stuff up.
Nope. They report it immediately, and finally, he's extradited back to California to face charges for what he did to Tali.
About time. So justice was served, right?
Well, here's the thing. By that point, Tali and her family, they'd moved out of the country. She couldn't testify, so the charges reduced.
Reduced. You can't, after everything he did.
I know, it's unbelievable. He served 34 months. 34 months for brutally attacking a child.
That's outrageous.
Right. And sadly for Alcala, that wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. And unfortunately for a lot of people, his story doesn't end there. Tali, she was just the beginning. And back then, forensics weren't what they are now. So a lot of his crimes, they stayed hidden for years.
It's bone-chilling, really. All those years he's out there. What happened next?
Well, after his sentence for the attack on Tali, it's like he just went on a terrible road trip. California, New York, Wyoming, leaving a trail of victims. Mostly women, some girls.
How did he convince them?
Alcala, he had this thing he'd do. See, he'd pretend to be a photographer.
A photographer?
Yep. He'd approach these women, talking about photo shoots, exposure, the whole deal. Prey on their dreams, basically.
That's just evil, using photography like that.
And get this, when they finally caught him, hundreds of photos. Women, kids, most of them unidentified.
Wait, are they still unidentified?
A lot of them, yeah. And some of the photos. Descripting doesn't even cover it.
I can only imagine. Do they think those photos could help identify more victims?
That's the hope. Authorities are trying, but it's a long shot. Imagine those families, though, not knowing.
Doesn't bear thinking about. So let's talk about the confirmed murders. What do we know about them?
Well, in '71, while he was still on the run for what he did to Tali, he murdered a 23-year-old woman, Cornelia Crilly, in New York City.
You still on the run?
Yep. Then, in '77, he's out on parole, back in New York, and kills again. Ellen Hover, she was 27.
It's like he couldn't stop himself. How did he get away with it for so long?
He was careful, knew how to blend in. Plus, back then, communication between police departments wasn't what it is now.
So he just slipped through the cracks.
Pretty much. But in '79, he messed up. He killed 12-year-old Robin Sampson.
This was the turning point.
It was. Witnesses saw Robin talking to someone who looked just like Alcala.
So they had a description.
And remember Alcala's parole officer? The one who recognized him from the Tally Shapiro case.
Yeah, what about him?
He sees Alcala's sketch in the news, and he knows. Calls it in right away. That was it.
Finally.
Well, sort of. They arrested him, but even then, Alcala's story didn't end. The trials, the appeals, they went on for decades.
Decades? What took so long?
Alcala, he was something else. Represented himself in some of the trials.
He did. Why would he do that?
Control, plain and simple. The courtroom was his stage. He wanted to be the center of attention, even then.
That must have been so difficult for the families.
It was a circus. And through it all, he showed zero remorse. But there was one thing that Alcala couldn't outrun.
What's that?
DNA. See, at first the evidence was mostly circumstantial. But then DNA technology, it got so much better.
So they were able to use DNA to connect him to those murders.
You got it. 4 more murders in California. Jill Barkham, Georgia Wixted, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parento, all from the late 70s.
And all those unidentified photos, could there be more?
Alcala actually bragged that there might be as many as 130 victims.
130? Are you serious?
Whether it's true or just more of his twisted games, we don't know. But the possibility, it's horrifying. Those families, they may never have answers.
It's heartbreaking.
It really makes you think. We remember the victims, of course. But their families, they're victims too.
Absolutely. You know, it's crazy to think how different this whole story could have been if those campers hadn't seen that poster or if that parole officer hadn't put 2 and 2 together.
It really shows how much things have changed, right? I mean, back then, police departments weren't exactly sharing notes like they do now. Databases. Forget about it. And those gaps. That's how guys like Alcala could just disappear.
And reappear, unfortunately. It makes you wonder, though, knowing what we know now, could he have fooled us too? I mean, this was a guy who charmed his way onto national TV.
Right. Everyone said he was charming on the dating game. Engaging. But looking back, knowing what he was capable of, you start to see those little signs, those moments that probably got brushed off at the time.
It's chilling to think someone could be that good at hiding who they really are.
It's a reminder that evil doesn't always come with a warning label. Sometimes it looks just like everyone else. Blends right in. That's what makes it so hard to protect ourselves.
It makes you want to go back and watch that episode, you know, just to see if you would have noticed anything off.
Yeah, that's the thing about true crime, isn't it? It makes you face the darkest parts of humanity. Makes you question everything.
And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe by learning about cases like this, we can be a little more aware, a little more cautious.
Exactly. We got to be our own best protectors, right?
Yeah. Well said. So, to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. Knowing what you know now about Rodney Alcala, about the monster hiding behind that charming smile, would you have gone on that date? Would you have been fooled?
It's a question worth thinking about.
That's our deep dive on Rodney Alcala. Stay safe out there, everyone. Trust your instincts. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.